Name is Abby and I am 31 years old. I still remember the exact moment I realized my stepfather had tried to kill me. Not in a dramatic, movie villain kind of way. In the quiet, deniable, completely cowardly way that people who hate you but love their reputation tend to operate. I remember the smell of gasoline on my hands. I remember the way the steering wheel felt when it stopped responding. And I remember my stepfather's face at the hospital. Not scared, not guilty. Just watching. Calculating. Waiting to see how this would play out for him. That image has never left me. I grew up in a small town outside of Raleigh, North Carolina. My mother remarried when I was 9 years old. His name was Gerald. Gerald had a firm handshake, a loud laugh, and a gift for making everyone around him feel like they were the most important person in a room. Everyone except the people who lived with him. My mother thought she had found something rare. A man who wanted to be a father to her 2 daughters. I was 9. My younger sister, Poppy, was 6. We had lost our dad to a heart attack the year before, and my mother was drowning in grief and bills and a house she could not afford to keep. Gerald showed up like a solution. And for a while, maybe he was. He paid the mortgage. He showed up to school events. He grilled burgers on summer weekends and called us his girls in public. I want to be fair about that. He was not a monster every day. Most days, he was just a man who lived in our house and tolerated our presence the way you tolerate a neighbor's dog that keeps wandering into your yard. But Poppy was different to him. Poppy was younger, softer, easier to win over. She had our mother's eyes and Gerald's willingness to believe the best in people. She laughed at his jokes. She asked him to teach her things. By the time she was 12, she had fully adopted him in a way I never could. I was the difficult one. The one who remembered our dad. The one who did not laugh when Gerald's jokes had an edge. The one who asked questions he did not like being asked, like why he came home late smelling like something other than a work dinner, or why the second credit card bill looked different from the one he showed my mother. I did not have proof of anything specific back then. I just had instincts. And Gerald knew it. By the time I left for college in Charlotte, the unspoken tension between us had calcified into something permanent. I was polite when I came home. He was polite back. My mother was relieved by the performance. Poppy thought we had finally found our rhythm. I built a life away from them, got a degree in accounting, which my mother told everyone about with a pride she never quite managed to show me directly. Took a job with a mid-size firm in Charlotte. Rented an apartment I loved. Started seeing a therapist named Dr. Ashby who helped me understand that what I had grown up inside of was not normal, even if it was quiet. For 3 years, I kept my visits home minimal. Thanksgiving, sometimes Christmas. I would stay 2 nights maximum. Always book a hotel rather than sleep in my old room. Always drive my own car so I could leave when I needed to. These were the small dignities I allowed myself. Then my mother had her hip surgery. It was not an emergency. Planned procedure, routine as these things go for women in their mid-50s who spent 20 years on their feet managing other people's needs. But she was going to need help for 6 to 8 weeks post-surgery. And Gerald, who had taken early retirement the year before, had apparently decided this was not his department. He's been overwhelmed, my mother told me on the phone, which was her way of explaining why a retired man with no job and no obligations could not manage to pick up prescriptions and heat up soup for his own wife. Poppy lived 40 minutes away with her husband and their 2 kids. I lived 2 hours away with nothing but a flexible remote work setup and a cat named Biscuit. The math was not complicated. I arranged to work remotely from my mother's house for 3 weeks. I told myself it would be manageable. I had done harder things. What I had not done was spend 3 consecutive weeks under Gerald's roof as an adult. It became clear within the first few days that something had shifted. Gerald was more openly hostile than he had ever been when I was growing up. Maybe because I was no longer a child he could dismiss. Maybe because I was there to help my mother and he resented the implication that he had not been doing the job. Maybe it was something else entirely that I was only beginning to piece together. He made comments about my job. Small ones, but aimed. Nice that you can just log on from anywhere. Must be easy work. He questioned my cooking. I had made my mother's favorite lemon chicken and he told her it tasted store-bought. He went through my car twice while I was inside, which I only noticed because I had left a water bottle on the passenger seat and it was on the floor both times I came back out. I mentioned it to my mother once, gently. She told me I was reading into things. Told me Gerald was just adjusting to having people in his space. I recognized the familiar shape of that sentence. I had heard versions of it my whole childhood, so I kept my head down. I helped my mother with her physical therapy exercises. I cooked and cleaned and took her to her follow-up appointments. I FaceTimed with Dr. Tuhar Ashby twice a week to keep myself grounded. I told myself 3 weeks had a finish line. On the Thursday of my second week, Gerald asked if he could borrow my car. His truck was making a noise and he wanted to take it to his mechanic, he said, and the mechanic's shop was not on a bus line. He would only need it for the morning. I said yes. I do not know why I said yes. Maybe I was trying to demonstrate good faith. Maybe I was just tired of managing every interaction with maximum vigilance. I handed him the keys. He brought the car back 3 hours later. Said the truck was fine, just a belt issue all taken care of. I thanked him. He shrugged and went back to his recliner. That evening I had to drive to the pharmacy to pick up my mother's prescription. It was a 20-minute round trip I had made 4 or 5 times already that week. Nothing I gave any thought to. I was about 8 minutes from the house, on a 2-lane road that runs along the edge of a reservoir, when I pressed the brake at a curve and nothing happened. I want to be precise about that moment because I have replayed it so many times. The pedal went to the floor. Soft, useless. I pumped it, nothing. I grabbed for the emergency brake and it slowed me but not enough for the curve, and I went off the right side of the road and down a short embankment into the tree line. The airbag deployed. I hit my face on something, the headrest, I think, on the way down. The car stopped against 2 trees, and I sat there for what felt like a long time, ears ringing, not fully understanding what had just happened. A man who had been driving behind me stopped and called 911. His name was Felix, and I will never forget him. He was 60-something, retired, on his way to pick up his granddaughter from soccer practice. He stayed with me on that embankment until the paramedics arrived, holding my hand and talking to me about his granddaughter, about soccer, about nothing important, because he understood that I needed a voice to hold on to. The paramedics confirmed I was conscious and responsive. My face was cut from something during impact and I had a significant contusion on my left shoulder, but they did not suspect a spinal injury. They transported me to the hospital for imaging. My mother called, hysterical with worry. Gerald drove her to the hospital. I was told this when the nurse came in to say my family had arrived. Family. I remember looking at the ceiling and thinking about the word. The ER physician, Dr. Rowe, cleared me of any fractures or serious head injury. I had a moderate concussion, soft tissue damage in my shoulder, and enough adrenaline in my system to keep me from feeling most of it until much later. She told me I was lucky. I told her my brakes had failed. She looked at me for a moment, then asked if the car had been serviced recently. I told her what had happened, that Gerald had borrowed the car that morning, that the brakes had been fine before that the road where I went off was one I had driven multiple times without any issue. She said nothing to me directly, but she sent the nurse back in 20 minutes later to ask whether I would be willing to speak to a police officer who happened to be at the hospital on another matter. I said yes. Gerald was still in the waiting room with my mother when Officer Delgado came to my room. I told him exactly what I told Dr. Rowe. He wrote everything down. He asked about my relationship with Gerald. He did not tip his hand either way. Before I could ask what would happen next, he told me that the car would need to be inspected by their accident reconstruction team before any conclusions could be drawn. He was calm, professional, and careful with his language in a way that told me he was taking this seriously without wanting to alarm me. My mother came in after he left. She sat in the chair beside my bed and held my hands, and for a few minutes I thought something had broken open in her. That the presence of a police officer and her injured daughter in a hospital bed had finally made something real to her that had always been abstract. Gerald is devastated, she said. He feels terrible about the car. He's been saying he should have checked it before he gave it back. I looked at her face. She believed it. She fully, genuinely believed her husband was a man consumed by innocent remorse. I did not say what I was thinking. I just squeezed her hand and looked at the ceiling. The accident reconstruction report came back 11 days later. I was back in Charlotte by then, back in my apartment, ice on my shoulder every evening, sleeping badly. My attorney, a woman named Dolores who specialized in personal injury and had a reputation in Charlotte that made insurance companies nervous, called me the afternoon the report was released. The brake lines on my car showed evidence of deliberate tampering. Not wear, not corrosion. A clean partial cut on the rear brake line positioned in a way that would allow the brakes to function normally at low speeds and in the driveway, but fail under sustained pressure at highway or winding road speeds. Dolores said, "Abby, you need to hear this clearly. Someone did this on purpose." I already knew. I had known since I was sitting on that embankment in the dark listening to Felix talk about soccer. Gerald was arrested 3 days later. The charges were felony assault with intent to cause serious bodily injury, tampering with a vehicle, and, because of the road and the reservoir, reckless endangerment. The detective who called me was the same Officer Delgado from the hospital. He told me they had also found a set of wire cutters in Gerald's garage with brake fluid on them. My mother called me an hour after Gerald's arrest. I thought she was calling to tell me she was sorry, to tell me she finally understood, to say the words that would have meant everything if she had said them even once during my childhood. Instead, she said, "There must be some mistake. Gerald would never do this. You know how much he loves this family." I held the phone, and I did not say anything for a long time. Then I said, "Mom, they found the wire cutters." She said, "Tools can end up anywhere in a garage. That doesn't mean anything." I understood in that moment that my mother was not going to come through for me. Not because she was a bad person in every way, but because she had built her entire life around a story that required Gerald to be who she needed him to be. Admitting he had tried to kill her daughter meant admitting she had brought that man into her daughter's home, had defended him for 22 years, had told me I was reading into things every single time my instincts were right. That was too much to carry, so she put it down and let me carry it instead. Poppy called that same night. I had been dreading it because Poppy and I had never fully talked about what Gerald was, and I did not know where she would land. She cried the entire call. Not for Gerald. For me, she said. "I should have listened to you years ago. I should have backed you up when you tried to tell Mom." She said, "I am so sorry, Abby." She said it like she meant it, and she did. That phone call mattered more than I can explain. After a lifetime of being the one who saw things and was told she was wrong, having my sister say, "You were right and I failed you," was something I had not known I was still waiting for. Gerald pled not guilty. His attorney tried to argue that the brake line damage could have been pre-existing, that the accident reconstruction team had used flawed methodology, that there was no concrete proof Gerald had been near the brake lines during the 3 hours he had the car. The trial took 4 days. Felix testified about what he witnessed on the road that evening. Dr. Rowe testified about my injuries and the conversation that prompted her to involve law enforcement. The accident reconstruction expert testified for 90 minutes about the nature of the cut, the position, the intent it indicated, and Dolores, who was not handling the criminal case but had submitted a civil filing that ran parallel to it, made sure the jury understood the financial and personal history between Gerald and me, the life insurance policy my mother had signed 5 years earlier, the inheritance from my father's side of the family that would pass to my mother, and then, in the event of her death, to her surviving children, the quiet economic incentive that had existed for years beneath the surface of our family portrait. Gerald was convicted. Felony assault, vehicle tampering, reckless endangerment. The judge sentenced him to 9 years. I was in the courtroom when they read the verdict. I did not cry. I had thought I would, but I did not. I just sat very still and felt the specific weight of being believed by people who had no reason to protect me. 12 strangers who had listened and decided that what I said had happened, had happened. My mother did not attend the trial. She has not spoken to me since 2 weeks after Gerald's arrest, when I declined to sign a letter her attorney drafted suggesting that the charges should be reduced in light of Gerald's prior positive contribution to our family. I told her I would not sign it. She told me I was destroying what was left of our family. I have thought about that sentence many times. The idea that I was the one doing damage, that the correct response to a man who cut my brake lines was to help him avoid the consequences so that my mother could keep the version of her life that she preferred. I did not destroy anything. What I did was survive. The civil case settled 14 months after the accident. Dolores negotiated an amount that covered my medical bills, ongoing therapy, lost income during recovery, and compensation for what the settlement documents called pain, suffering, and permanent diminishment of quality of life, the last part referring to the shoulder, which required surgery and has never fully recovered its range of motion. I cannot lift my left arm above my head without pain. I have learned to work around it. Some days I barely notice it, and other days it is the first thing I am aware of when I wake up. The money did not fix anything that mattered, but it meant I did not have to move out of my apartment when the medical bills arrived. It meant I could afford the specific shoulder specialist who gave me back 70% of what I had lost. It meant that Gerald's actions had a cost that extended beyond the courtroom. Poppy and I talk every week now. She lives in Raleigh and I drive down every couple of months to spend a weekend with her and the kids. She never tries to make me feel guilty about our mother. She has her own relationship with that situation that I try not to weigh in on unless she asks. Dr. Ashby has been with me through all of it. There was a period after the trial, about 4 months in, when I had convinced myself I was fine, that I had processed everything and was moving forward. She gently pointed out that I was describing my own near-death experience with the emotional register of someone summarizing a mildly inconvenient work meeting, and that maybe that deserved some attention. She was right. The real processing came later. The grief for the mother I had needed and never had. The anger I had compressed for 2 decades into a kind of watchful self-sufficiency. The strange guilt that kept surfacing even though I had done nothing wrong. The voice that said maybe if I had been different, easier, less perceptive, things would have gone differently. I know better now. That voice was installed by people who needed me to doubt myself. I have been doing the work of uninstalling it for 2 years. I still live in Charlotte. Same apartment, though I have redone the living room twice because that is what I do when I need to feel like I have control over something. I got promoted last year to senior analyst, which made exactly one person proud, me, and genuinely. My cat Biscuit is elderly now and moves slowly but still sleeps across my feet every night like he is performing a service. Last spring, I started volunteering with a local program that works with women navigating domestic situations that are hard to name. Not always violent in obvious ways, sometimes just the slow erosion that happens when someone spends years being told that what they see isn't real. I do not lead sessions or counsel anyone. I am not qualified for that. I just come in twice a month and sit with people and tell them that instincts are data. That if something feels wrong, it is worth paying attention to, even when everyone around you is explaining it away. I think about Felix sometimes, the man who pulled over on a dark road because someone needed help and he could give it. He sent me a card after the trial. Just a plain card, handwritten, that said he was glad I was okay and that he hoped things got easier. I have kept it. It sits in the drawer of my nightstand with a few other things I want to remember. I do not know if my mother will ever be someone I have a real relationship with again. I have stopped organizing my healing around that question. Whether she comes to understand what happened and what it cost me, that is her work to do or not do. My healing does not require her participation. What I have come to understand, slowly and not without a lot of resistance, is that the family you are born into is one thing, and the life you build is another. The people who show up when it is inconvenient. The sister who calls and cries and says she was wrong. The retired stranger who holds your hand on an embankment and talks about soccer until the sirens arrive. The doctor who listens and acts. The detective who writes everything down. These are the people who built something with me in the years since that night. They are not a perfect substitute for what I needed as a child and did not get. But they are real, and they are mine, and that has turned out to be enough. I do not tell the story looking for sympathy. I tell it because somewhere out there is someone sitting with a feeling they cannot name, in a house with a person who makes them doubt themselves, wondering if they are reading into things. You are probably not reading into things. Trust what you know. And if you can, Start building your way out. Not because it will be easy, but because you deserve a life where your reality is not something you have to defend every single day. If any part of this resonated with you, I would like to hear about it in the comments. Not because I need validation, I have done enough work to know where my validation comes from now, but because these stories matter when they find each other. And maybe yours is exactly what someone else needs today. I have thought a lot about cause and effect since that night on the Reservoir Road, not in any mystical sense. I am too practical for that. Just the plain mechanical reality that choices accumulate. That the things we do and the things we refuse to do have weight, and eventually, that weight lands somewhere. Gerald made choices for 22 years, small ones and large ones. The choice to resent a child who saw through him, the choice to manipulate and isolate and erode. And then, when those choices had not been enough to neutralize the threat he believed I represented, one final choice with a pair of wire cutters in a garage on a Thursday morning. Every one of those choices had a direction. They were all pointed at the same place, and my mother made choices too. The choice to explain away what I noticed. The choice to prioritize the stability of her household over the safety of her daughter. The choice, even after the arrest, to ask me to sign a letter, softening the consequences for a man who had tried to end my life. I do not say this to condemn her. I say it because pretending those choices did not happen would be its own kind of dishonesty, and I have had enough of that to last me the rest of my life. What I keep coming back to is this. Integrity is not something you perform when it is convenient. It is what you do when it costs you something. Felix, a stranger, pulled over on a dark road when he did not have to. Dr. Rowe listened and acted when she could have documented the injury and moved on. Officer Delgado wrote everything down and treated my account as worth investigating. None of these people knew me. None of them owed me anything. They acted with integrity anyway because that is the kind of people they had built themselves into. That is the thing nobody tells you about resilience. It is not about being tough enough to take the hit. It is about being honest enough, over time, to know what you are dealing with, and then doing the next right thing anyway. I spent years doubting my own instincts because the people closest to me needed me to doubt them. Learning to trust what I knew, to act on it even when it made me inconvenient, even when it cost me relationships I had wanted to preserve. That was the hardest work I have ever done. Harder than the shoulder surgery. Harder than the trial. And Poppy. I think about Poppy on that phone call. The courage it takes to say I was wrong and I failed you to someone you love. That is not a small thing. Most people never manage it. She did it at midnight, crying because she decided that the truth mattered more than her own comfort in that moment. That choice changed what was possible between us. It is the reason we talk every week now. Every action finds its consequence eventually. Gerald is in prison. My shoulder still aches on cold mornings. My mother lives in a version of events I can no longer participate in. And I am here, in my apartment, with my elderly cat, and my promoted title and my twice-monthly volunteer shifts, building something that is genuinely mine. That is enough. That has always been enough. I just had to survive long enough to see it.